The intro.
Talk shoes.
Recorded live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the the Black Science Fiction Society.com website. I am your host, William Hayashi. I'm an author and a screenwriter, but this is my Friday night gig because my life is so pitiful. I don't go anywhere on Fridays. Tonight's special guest for the November 1st, 2013 edition is Joe Mcfee. Is that right?
That is
Joe?
Correct. Yep.
And he is a fellow Chicagoan, but he is on the south side because it is too rainy today for us to get together and do the show from the same location. Joe, welcome to the show. How's it going for you today?
It's going by pretty well. Just, looking forward to this whole event. I mean, everybody that I know that's, noticed it on Facebook and everything was more excited than I am. Everybody was like, you about to do an interview for Genesis? We want to hear from you. We really want to know what you think. So, I mean that's great because even if they don't actually show up during the show, so many people check this out as a podcast. So you'll get some traction from that as well over the next week or so. We had a little bit of chatting before. Let's talk a little bit about your beginnings. Have you always lived in Chicago? I was pretty much born and raised here. I only left Chicago twice in my entire lifetime. One time when my mother's job moved her to Jackson, Mississippi, and the other time when I was in the Air Force. I had to go to Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, did you happen to work at the NORAD Center there at all?
No, I didn't get a chance to work at Cheyenne Mountain. I was about 30 miles north of that at the United States Air Force Academy at that base, and I did get a chance to go to like Falcon Air Force Base that's also in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and the Boneyard up in Mesa, Arizona.
Mm-hmm. It is one of my favorite places to go. I go there about every 25 years, which tells you exactly how often I'm able to get away. But it's beautiful over there. What did you do while you were in the Air Force? Anything specific?
Pretty much, I was going to school. I was going to become an aerospace engineer. That's what I was originally admitted into the United States Air Force Academy to become. However, that kind of changed when a couple of officers started to notice that I had a greater aptitude for computers, and they wanted me to do computer programming, and one thing led to another, and then some other stuff had happened. It just got to the point where I was academically disenrolled, so I came out with an honorable discharge because of that.
Oh. Okay. Well, I'm not going to ask any details, but anyway,
nothing really bad came out of it. It was
okay.
It was more along the lines because of the drastic shift between one curriculum to the other one. I ended up failing a couple of courses. One was a chemistry course, and another one was like a foreign language art course. And every time you go below a certain grade point average, you have to go in front of a review board, and the review board recommendation for me was to be disenrolled up under honorable terms. So.
Oh, well, that's good. I thought it might have been a bad thing. No, but that sounds good. For those who don't know, Joe actually went to the high school he attended in Chicago was, at the time I went to high school, one of our fiercest rivals. As a matter of fact, they're only about 1.5 miles from each other. So that we have a little bit of affinity there.
Right.
And you mentioned the IT stuff, and obviously you've been doing that. You attended IIT. You got you got your degree in computer science. But as far as like the creative things that you do now, the comic book, publishing novels and doing things like that, when did kind of those skills, those kind of interests, when did they start kicking in for you?
We have to go all the way back to junior high school.
Oh, well, see, that's great. So you had an affinity, or you had a creative bent that early on, right?
That is correct here. I had a lot of art teachers, and then I was also in the gifted program. And one of my teachers that they had for that used to be an editor for, I believe it was called, what was it called? Comics Illustrated. She used to be a former editor for that. So she kind of guided me through some of the stuff and was encouraging a lot of the art stuff. And every teacher after that was encouraging the comic art side, except for my art teachers. My art teacher was like, "No, stop doing contour drawing. We want you to do landscapes. We want you to do this. We want you to do this type of painting. We want you to do that." So it was kind of like conflicting things, because one of the two things that I really got from like junior high school all the way up to now is, one, I could letter like no other. I still have to go back and reteach myself calligraphy, but that was one of the things that I used to do for every teacher there was, from like 7th grade of junior high school to about like 9th grade. They always put me to the side, like, "Oh, we want you to do this in, this in calligraphic letters. Well, we want this in Gothic this time, and this one in Old English and everything." And I would just sit there, I would draw the stuff out, color it in, hand it to them.
Now, did you make any money doing that, or were they just exploiting you as child labor?
It was exploiting for child labor, because it's always for school projects. Come on now. It was always for school projects. It was anything for money.
Right. And what about like influences at home? Were you were you encouraged along artistic lines, or how did that work out for you?
Comic book wise, it was weird, because even before junior high school, one of the things that was done more as a treat than as as being encouraged was, every so often my mother would take me to a comic book store. I would get a couple of comic books, or my older brother at the time would smuggle some in and let me have them. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, I used to have like a reading deficiency. I used to have a low reading comprehension, and my reading comprehension wasn't more so about not being able to comprehend what I read. It was more along the lines that everything that a lot of people had me to read never kept my interest.
Right.
So they will put like a story in front of me. It's like, well, break down the story. I would be able to break down the story, but then they would ask like the complex questions, like, well, what do you think this character really feels? I was like, I really don't care.
Okay.
And then up there, like, you got a problem. It's like, you got a serious problem. It's like, what do you mean I got a serious problem? I mean, it's like, the whole artistic aspect of it, I never really got until I was actually in my later years in high school.
And then, I mean, did people finally understand that your lack of interest was not a learning disability? It was just a lack of interest.
Well, yes, that was the whole reason why the comics came into play and magazines came into play. Mm-hmm. It brought a different aspect of things that I was literally interested in.
Yeah, that happens with a lot of people. They'll find that their kids are not interested with their schoolwork, with this, with that, and then they start to panic, as parents do now, and they go and they have the kids take these special tests and everything, find out their kid is perfectly fine. They're just not they're not stimulated by the regular run-of-the-mill classwork, and which is no deficiency at all, except that nowadays they try to homogenize kids with pharmaceuticals. Well, your kid doesn't fit in, so we're going to give him some Ritalin or something. But I mean, now, how was that? How was that handled at home? Did your family understand? That the lack of interest was not, anything organic or systemic. It was just a matter of the things that were brought to you to do didn't make sense, and you weren't interested in.
Well, eventually, as I grew older, they did realize that. It was just, how can I put this? It was more like from 2nd grade to about like 6th grade, I was going from like tutor to tutor and everything because they were saying that, oh, he's weak in reading and he was weak in English, and it wasn't really that way. It was more along the lines I was not interested in a lot of stuff, a lot of the stories that they put in front of me. And then the English side was more along the lines that I was following standard English rules. It's just that I was not regurgitating what they wanted me to regurgitate on paper.
Mhm. Yeah, I kind of went through a little bit of that too, and my desk was always up by the teacher's desk because I just wasn't interested. And that that's difficult because teachers have a hard time spending extra time with kids and stuff like that. So this is kind of elementary school for you. Did things change much for you by the time you got to high school?
It changed a lot because of certain things here, and the reason why teachers kind of caught what I was doing more so. It's like sometimes you have students that just don't do well on tests and just barely skate by. Then you got other students that just don't do well in one subject, and there's over emphasis on getting that one particular subject done. In my case, as I was growing up, I was scoring in high school level on standardized tests in mathematics and science. But when it came to reading and verbal and for written stuff, I was scoring way below my grade level, and people were just looking at it strange. If it was like, well, how can he maintain this without understanding this?
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why it was more overly emphasized. That we got to make sure that his reading comprehension. They saw that I wasn't slow. They saw that I was gifted, but I wasn't slow. I was more advanced in this area, so they kept me advancing in that aspect as far as the math and science is concerned. But they didn't know how to really address the reading comprehension and some of the things with the English.
Now, obviously, you're going through this yourself at the time. What were you thinking, or how were you dealing with this, or were you thinking, along the lines like, I wish these people would leave me the hell alone. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. Or did you, I caught on, and I'll tell you how late it was when I caught on. I caught on as a sophomore in high school, and you have to have all kinds of grades and test scores and stuff like that in order to get in a good college. And it was almost too late for me when I figured out what the game was. I mean, how did you square up to that, while you were in elementary school and into high school? That realization.
Like an average kid. I was pretty much like an average kid. So none of the kids, made fun of me or anything like that. I was treated just like a normal kid. Even at home, I was treated like a normal kid. So I never really thought about it until after I got into really high school. That's when I had a lot more of the English composition teachers really try to jump down my throat, calling me lazy and all this other stuff. I was like, no, I'm not lazy. And I would go back and point out rules of how to write and everything back to them. It's like, explain to me this and explain to me that. How am I breaking the rules? And then they would say, it's like, well, if you want to do it that way, then you need to make sure you concentrate on tense and all this other stuff. And, I was constantly going back and forth with a lot of the English lit and the English composition teachers in high school. And that's when I really got to that unnerving type aspect of, okay, English is being taught to regurgitate what the teacher is saying. And that's when my mother, was really like, sometimes you just got to play that game, just regurgitate back what the teacher is saying, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't until after I got to college that I actually had college professors try to do the exact same thing, and then they go to office hours, and then they say, it's like, no, you're perfectly fine. You just have to understand your thinking is a lot more advanced than what the average person is when it comes to writing. You have to learn how to take that step backwards.
so that you could fit in at least enough to get the grades and to satisfy the expectations that they had of you.
Exactly.
Now, so when did like did you get into the comic part, the drawing part, art? What was the entomology of where your talent manifested itself? Were you an artist? Did you do the stories for comic books? I mean, where did that kind of start out early on for you?
Pretty much, I was going to say elementary. In junior high school, I used to pretty much draw freehand from what I saw in comic books. I pretty much got to the point where I was pretty much like a Xerox machine. I could pretty much look at it, draw it perfectly fine. But my strongest suit was always the writing because I was always coming up with newer stories.
Okay.
I was always writing them down more so than trying to, mimic an actual comic book. It wasn't until my sophomore year of high school that I actually started, like, literally sitting down and drawing my own stuff. Unfortunately, most of that stuff is now lost and gone and just thrown away because of a flood that had happened at my house at the time.
Oh,
I
no.
I lost a lot of my older stuff from 1989 to about 95.
And so, when you would do your stories, would you then draw the kind of like the action, the pictures, the panels that would go along with your stories?
I would do the full layouts and everything.
And what kind of response did you get from your peers?
A lot of the peers would look at what I was drawing and it was like, okay, cool, but can you draw this? And I would draw something else for them. And I was always in competition with other people who drew better than me.
Okay.
Because, like I said, my greatest asset was more of the writing and the layout side. And I was always pushing myself to compete with whoever was the best artist there.
You mean the best artist in school?
Yeah. Whether it's school or who I know or everything like that. So I was always, looking at how they did stuff and was learning.
Yeah.
And understanding concepts and everything to that magnitude.
And so about how, did you have your own creative universes that you kind of stuck with? When did you start doing, now I don't want to say serial work because not everybody does that, but did you have a certain style, a certain kind of genre, a certain kind of, did you have your own creative universe with your own characters that you worked in? Or, obviously it sounds like you did, what I guess we would call commission work for your friends to say, hey, draw me this or draw me that. But where were you going with your own personal
Actually, you hit the nail on the head. I was going serial. I was actually going for the serial. I was going for, issue to issue to issue to issue to issue.
So you had broad story arcs? Nice. You had broad story arcs, and you had a stable of characters too?
Exactly. I was slowly developing universe after universe after universe. At first, all the characters that I was making were in different universes. But as I moved along, by the time I got to the Air Force, I just started combining them. I started to see how I could bring certain characters into the same universe, and then by the time I got to my sophomore year of college, I ended up meeting Adrian Allen, who was a good artist friend of mine. He literally got me back into the groove, and as far as writing and going back out and doing the artwork and everything, and doing the artist alleys and stuff again.
And now, I'm sorry, you were in the Air Force when this happened, or
I was
college?
I was in the Air Force when I started to develop the XSU universe.
Okay, and
that would have been about 1994, 95-ish, somewhere around there.
And did you have a distribution channel for your work or what?
No, that was pretty much amateur stuff. I haven't went to the pro side of things until 2008. 2008 was when I just said, I don't care anymore. Let's move forward with this title. Put this title out there. Let's see what people think. Everything else I just, was doing like fan art, and then I would do maybe like 1 or 2 pages here, 1 or 2 pages there, just to keep like the layout stuff going and stuff like that. Then I believe it was 2006. Adrian and myself, we're sitting at his apartment and everything. He's up here, it's like, man, I really want to develop something of our own. So I was helping him develop his series, and we were kind of made like this pact. It's like, hey, why don't we help one another out? I help you out with the writing aspect. You help me out with the artwork.
Sure.
At that time, he started to go back to school for animation. And we started developing his stuff, and then I started developing my stuff. And as I was developing my stuff, he's like, well, the best way for you to go about it is just draw along with me. So I started drawing the book Amazonian 1 right then and there. So,
and did you guys finish it?
Well, I did all the work. that was the thing. That was the thing. He didn't do none of this. I did all the work, and he was like, okay, we need to refine it. We need to do this, and we need to do that. And I'm up there like, no.
And he was your friend. Why?
No. The reason why he was saying that, because he understood about everything being polished, and if it's polished enough, you don't have any worries. And my thing was, it's like, no, we cannot procrastinate anymore.
Right. You really wanted to push this forward.
This is a good story. The story will sell by itself as long as people know that the artwork will get better.
Mm-hmm.
So I went ahead full force. And I pushed the issue, and I actually started printing out Amazonian 1 through a at the time it was through Comic Express. I went to Comic Express. We got about like 100 or so copies of issue number 1. And
how was it received?
2009 at Wizard World Chicago. Opened up the door for Xigency Studios to move forward, because that same year I ended up talking to the likes of Dan Slott and a lot of other writers for Marvel and DC, and Dan Slott pretty much put it in perspective for me. For you to make it anywhere in this industry, you're going to have to put out your own stuff. For you to be picked up by a Marvel and DC, and this is how he got into the industry as a writer.
Okay.
He went through several rejections, and then he just started working on side projects while he was waiting for an inroad to get into Marvel. And he said that's always going to be the best way. Make them come to you instead of you going to them. So at that time, I gave him a copy of issue number 1 for a thank you and everything. And here's the cool thing about it. Now I'm up here thinking, he's not going to think too much about the book and everything to that magnitude. The following year, the very first year, C2E2 happened at Chicago.
Right.
I had a booth at C2E2 as a small press and everything. He happened to be there. So I happened to go and visit him and everything, and, he's signing, at that time he was writing Amazing Spider-Man, so he signed Spider-Man book, and then he sees me. It's like, well, which book do you have for me to sign? It's like, well, pretty much I'm not here to sign. I just came back to say thank you again. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, do you remember that we met at Wizard World last year? It's like, give me a second. You're the one that had to, and he nailed it. He nailed the book. He's like, that's somewhat decent story. It's like, well, here's a present for you. The next 2 issues of the series.
And how cool is that?
I know, and just from there, it's like that just tells me that it's like, okay, I did do the right thing. Because if I would have procrastinated, I probably would not have that opportunity to meet the people that I have met that have worked in industry for the way that they did.
Right. For people who are interested in checking out your online site, it's I'm just going to spell it so that they can get to the website. It's Xigency Studios.com, www.xigencystudios.com to check out the homepage of your site, and they can take a look at where you may be showing up, what else is going on.
Current projects that we're working on.
Right.
Stuff to that matter. We even have press releases and stuff like that out there. One of the things that I know I have been bad about this year, I haven't been constantly keeping that website updated. It's kind of hard to be a one-man army, to be quite honest with you guys here.
Well, no, it is tough because a lot of people, if they are creatives, they don't realize that the business side of the business sometimes can take a lot more time and effort out of your day, out of your week, out of your month, out of your life than actually doing the creative part. The creative part, you can either do it as a singular pursuit or maybe doing it with somebody else. But when you have to go out and you have to do your own marketing, when you have to try to dig up get interest in your work, that in itself can be more than a full-time job. That can be an overtime job. How do you manage that mix for trying to get both things done?
Well, with the Amazonia series, I had to do it series by series. With the Amazonia series, the good thing when I got started with issue number 1, the cool thing that I did was I wrote 6 issues in advance.
Okay.
I have wrote and scripted 6 issues. Right now, I'm currently drawing issue number 4 as of right now. Well, actually, I had to stop drawing issue number 4. I had to stop rendering issue number 1 of Primetime Saturday Night because of what happened with Comixology. And I'm doing like a 5th anniversary edition of Amazonia 1 because of Comixology. But that's a different story. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm happy that Comixology came to me about that. So that's a different story. But with that series, I wrote 6 issues in advance. The only reason why AWF was around was more so because of Kimberly and everything. Because the only thing that I did with AWF, I drew up concept characters. I drew up the idea of doing it. Kimberly saw some of the characters that I was thinking about, and it's like, that's actually a cool idea. Why don't you go ahead and finish developing it? So that following year, I developed AWF. I wrote the first 2 issues back to back. And what was the cool thing about AWF is that while I was drawing issue 1, Kimberly was doing issue 2.
Okay.
So it was pretty much right then and there. After issue 1, I'm handing the torch directly to her from that point forward as the interior page artist. And everybody knew that up front, when they found out that I was doing that book. What else was cool about it is that we ended up getting a lot of other artists who wanted to do covers, who wanted to be a part of the AWF franchise because of that. I didn't realize that, pro wrestling was one of those things that have not really been touched in comic books in a long while, and that there was a lot of wrestling fans out there.
Well, sure. and so, other than the surprise, what kind of response were you getting from the fans who were checking out your work?
In the beginning, it was mixed.
Okay.
And the reason why it was mixed is because of the one thing that kind of, drives me up the wall when I talk to certain people who are trying to break into the industry. Everybody concentrates too much on the artwork instead of the overall presentation. It's a perfect marriage between artwork and story that makes a comic book great. So a lot of times people will pick up a comic book, will look at the artwork, and be like, okay, that's about average, and they flipping through it, and they're not really reading the story. They're not absorbing what the pages are really showing them. They're not looking at the illustration for the story. They're just looking at the artwork. It's like, this looks pretty cool. Okay, I'll go ahead and buy it.
Mhm.
And then after they buy it, when they sit down and really look at it and read it, it's like, well, this is garbage, or this is actually okay, or they go like, wow, this is a very good story.
Well, a lot of people don't think about. I mean, even creatives who are making, at least some decent money from their work, they don't always have the strongest stories because they think the visuals are most important. I mean, even look at Hollywood. Hollywood thinks that the visuals for a movie are the most important things about a movie, but then you have such a cheesy or really a poorly conceived story, and I don't particularly want to point out Pacific Rim, and embarrass anybody, but I mean, you look at some of these movies where they put all of this gargantuan money in there, and you walk out of the theater and you wonder, okay, so what was the story about? And I think the same thing with novels. I think the same thing with comic books. I think the same thing with even web serials or shorts. That if you don't have a good story, I think you're wasting everybody's time. And certainly, in some respects, you're wasting people's money. So, what do you do to make sure, how do you manage the creative side of writing those stories? I mean, what is it that, that speaks to you about making sure that you're putting together a story of quality and you're not taking people for a ride or you're not wasting their time? How do you push that forward?
How do I personally do that as not only as a creator but as a publisher and editor in chief
and a writer.
You want the full gambit? Okay.
Absolutely. Tell everybody everything. Give all your secrets away.
I'm not going to give all the secrets away. I'm going to have to keep some of them. But
okay,
I give them the bare basics of how I do it. It comes back down to planning. Getting feedback, and mimicking reality. Most people have to understand that most great stories somewhere down the line mimics reality in some form or some fashion.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot get around not mimicking something that could happen in real life. I mean,
otherwise what you do is, anytime somebody reads fiction, there's a suspension of disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And if you write if you write a poorly conceived story, it will, eventually that will pull people out of that suspension of disbelief, and all of a sudden, they're sitting outside the story going, that was just awful. The other thing that you mentioned. Go ahead.
I have a feeling that this is what you try to say in a nutshell. The worst feeling that you could ever have while reading a story is when a character does something and you look at it and you say, no person in their right mind would do this. And then at that point, you just like, well, this story has no meaning anymore. It's just flawed. It's garbage. And you start scrutinizing every other little bitty thing about the story, and the whole story takes a whole different spin on it.
Well, that's entirely true. And let's give a good example between cultures.
Uh-huh.
In black culture, when we hear the house talking to us in a bad voice, we move. White folks start going down in the basement with no lights on, trying to find out who's making the voice.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you hear people in the theater talking to the screen like, oh, that would never happen, things like that, and it does become a negative experience. You're right about the craftsmanship, about the story, but I will say this. As a writer, I have people say, hey, you've done this, you've done that. Could you take a look at my writing? And there are not, and then when I do a critique, they get upset because what they wanted was they wanted a cheerleader. They didn't really want to hear what I thought about maybe the story construction or the character makeup or anything like that. They want a cheerleader. So, one of the things that you're talking about that is so critical for people who want to get into the business, for people who want to excel, is to be sure that when you said you have to listen to your critics, you have to pay attention to what people say. There's a whole group out there, man, that just don't do that. They don't want to listen to any critique. They don't want to listen to anything that is not lauding them as the greatest thing in the world. So how did you get over that hump? Because that seems to be fairly common. It's a very fairly common failing. And what is it that makes you able to pay attention better to what your critics are saying than what we find in most people?
Well, that's because, from my standpoint, the way that I see a good story is more along the lines, can people really relate to it?
Right.
And if people can't relate to it, then it's not really worth writing. And if you're going to deal with that suspension of disbelief, you're going to have to literally sit down and literally ask people, okay, if you were put in this situation, what would you do? And they would tell you anything from the left side, where it's just completely off the wall, to everything from the right side, which is like overly logical. And you just have to find that middle ground where most people can just like, oh, yeah, I probably would have done that too. That makes sense. Or,
yeah,
I probably wouldn't have done it exactly that way, but it would have been similar. And then once you start writing on that particular level and you finally put it down on paper, or you finally draw it out on paper and script it out and everything, then you go back to the same people and it's like, here, take a look at this. And you look at it and it's like, okay, I can see where you're going with this, but I would have done that, I would have done this. And you just constantly take cross-section after cross-section or cross-section of opinion. And eventually you start understanding how people are going to receive certain characters. And once you have that idea of how that character is being perceived, it makes it that much easier for you to write it.
And it also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So if they see, like, this character over here is a way off-the-wall character and everything, you can get away with murder. And then you can sit there and pretty much write anything, you can get away with murder. But this character over here, they're like, no, he's a leader, he's a leader. He has to be, obstinate. He has to be stern. He has to be like this. And you get the feedback about him. If you manipulate him in any other way other than what they expect, they want to know why it's being done like that. They want some type of situation where that character has to step into to act that way. You just can't arbitrarily just do it because you have a whim for it. You have to literally build scenes, scenarios, dilemmas.
Well, you have to build a behavioral framework that's not only authentic, but is rational. Rational in a way that other people are going to go, they're going to be reading along, and the back of their mind is going to be going, yeah, of course that would, that makes sense. Oh yeah, and they, they're going along with the flow of the story, and nothing becomes disjointed enough to pull them out of that.
Well, not just only that, it also has to be organic. It cannot be forced, and that was the major thing that I saw in a lot of other people's writings. There's a lot of things that are being forced instead of letting it develop naturally. It's like sometimes you have to speed up what's going on in the scene, or sometimes you got to slow it down. You have to make it natural. It has to be organic. You just can't not just launch a character into a certain situation and just make him or her do what you want them to do right then and there. When people see how things are rushed, that's when they start questioning that disbelief.
Well, it can be jarring. It can be very jarring. And you know what? This is something that listeners should take to heart, because if you want to be a successful writer, you're going to have to do certain things, and one of the things is, essentially what you're doing is you're doing marketing research.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing marketing research about the characters, about the situations, about even the structure of your creative universe, and then you're actually listening to to criticisms about it, and refining the art down until you get to a certain essence of your creative universe that not only speaks, not only is consistent, but it speaks well to the audience, and that's essential. I mean, if it speaks well to the audience, people are going to buy your work. People are going to buy into your work. And not everybody does that. There are some people who are so stubborn who go, well, I don't have to listen to anybody else. I'm writing for myself, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And you look at the totality of what they're saying. Essentially what they're saying is, my audience doesn't matter. And what, they don't think that somebody's not going to figure that out? When I've had a lot of people say, well, I just write to please myself, and I go, well, okay, do a diary and don't bother me with it. And then they get insulted. But for you, I mean, you've already got a very refined process that obviously has been very successful. So people should pay attention to how you achieved that level of success by paying attention to your audience. And that's so essential because, by and large, we all want to sell our work. This is a business. This is how you make money doing what you want to do. This is how you take your creative work to a level where you can be compensated for it and possibly even make a living off of it. And to that end, what kind of response, what kind of numbers are you doing currently? How is all of this playing to your audience, and what kind of feedback are you getting these days?
I'm getting a lot better feedback on some of the books that we talk about, the ones that I still personally write and still develop, or you talk about just in general for Xigency Studios across the board.
Well, let's talk the specific first. You're
okay.
Obviously you still
my
you have
stuff.
and,
okay.
Yeah, you've got your process. You've got your process, and is your process working for you still? I mean, obviously it is.
Actually, it surprised me more so than anything. Going back to what I mentioned about the 5th anniversary edition of Amazonia #1.
Okay.
And dealing with what happened with Comixology. Now, I actually, was thinking to myself, it's like, well, I really need to get better distribution. I really need to do X, Y, and Z. So I ended up partnering up with Rorbits.com, and they have all the books out there on their website and everything, and we're slowly getting, noticed there as far as the digital side is concerned. But I also took a gamble in going to Comixology. Now, everybody knows about Comixology. That is the one of the biggest digital comics distributors in the United States here. I mean, you find Marvel, DC stuff, Image stuff. You'll find a little bit of everything there. So I went ahead. I submitted all of the current issues of Amazonia and all the current issues of AWF here out to them for distribution.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't, thinking too much of it and everything. And I was up here like, okay, if they reject it, they reject it. I could understand that, it's something that is like, okay, fine. It's the biggest distributor. It's the biggest distributor. I could understand them not wanting to take a chance on it.
Sure.
So a couple of months passed by, and this is after I asked for advice about doing this from somebody else by the name of Rusty Gillian, who's been in this industry for, over 20 years. And he pretty much says, like, no, go for it. Your stuff is okay. It's like, what do you mean it's okay? It's like, trust me, you shouldn't have a problem getting into Comixology. It's like, what do you mean I shouldn't have a problem? It's like, you see the competition that I got to deal with? It's like, no, your stuff is okay. You should be good to go. So, following his advice, I went ahead and did it. So, a couple of months goes by. They normally say it's like it takes on average to get 30 days to get it. So, by like the 4th month, I'm up here getting worried.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, out of the blue, out of nowhere, I get email notifications for Comicsology. So up here, like, okay, fine. It's like, okay, fine. It's like, oh, they accept something. It's like, okay. Back in my mind, up here, it's like, oh, they're probably going to accept the AWF because that was, at that time, in print, that was the biggest selling series in print. Come right back around. It's like, no, we want Amazonia. And I was like, what? It's like, we're ready to distribute issue 2 and 3. We want you to redo the lettering and the artwork and make a few changes to it before we could go ahead and put that series out there. And
were they were minor changes?
No, they were major changes.
Oh, major changes. Okay.
Well, minor in my point of view because of the simple fact that they wasn't asking me to change the story. They just want improved artwork, better lettering and everything for it could fit their digital model.
Okay.
For people could actually really read it without any hindrance on like tablets and everything to that magnitude.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Sure.
So it really meant that the issue has to be redrawn. It has to be also relettered, and there was like little bitty minor things page-wise that had to get done.
But those are stylistic changes. Those weren't necessarily changes to the storyline or anything else, right? You were just reformatting for a different format, correct?
Well, I just went ahead and just redid the whole entire issue. I kept the script the same. I redrew everything, reformatted everything, used different camera angles for certain panels. I mean, it's going to be if you held the original issue number 1 compared to the 5th anniversary edition, you'll see night and day difference between the two.
Okay.
It is going to be like, okay, why wasn't the original done this way? Type deal. And I'm not sure if people who are out there listening right now follow me on like Facebook or Tumblr or Twitter. I have been putting out like the digital ink pages. I have been putting out some of the pencils out there. And one of the things that I don't do, I don't really do like the side-by-side comparisons.
Okay.
Per se, but people are looking at the 5th anniversary edition was like, oh, okay, that's kind of a cool idea for the book. And I'm like, well, the book has already been out. I'm just redoing it pretty much because of the fact Comicsology is asking me to do it. Now, once I'm finished with it, guess what? The original number 1 is no longer going to be sold. I'm going to pull back on the original number 1. This will be the 5th anniversary will be the definitive number 1 from this point forward. That's one of the marketing things that I can do at that point. Because I don't want people to get confused between the two number 1s.
Right.
So those who have the original number 1, who bought the original number 1 or got the digital copy, hold on to it because that's a collector's item now. It will be.
Well, and you never know. I mean, later it could be re-released or, let's say you do a compendium for like a coffee table book or something like that. Obviously, there's still utility in not only maintaining it, but even re-releasing or, making it available in a new format for people to check it out.
Well, to be quite honest with you here, part of Amazonia 1 has been re-released in other magazines called in another magazine called the Luz del Ojo, the magazine, which is being published by Preston Shuttlesworth.
Mm-hmm.
And that had actually reached to print as of right now. At least the first 4 to 5 pages of Amazonia 1 has been released, I think, in the inaugural issue.
Okay.
And I know the original AWF number 1 has been done the exact same way. So there's other means and methods that you could get copies of that or at least see it in print.
Mm-hmm.
But once the 5th anniversary edition is done, and it's like I'm just going to pretty much repeal all the other ones, and whatever is left is going to be whatever is left as far
Sure.
as the original. But it's just one of those things. It's like if there becomes a great demand to have the original back out there again, I don't have a problem coming out with a second printing of it.
Okay. Somebody mentioned something here in the chat room.
Okay.
When you started out, how did you come up with like front money to get some things done, to do distribution and things like that? How, from the business perspective of it, what kind of work did you do? What kind of planning did you do? And did you follow any kind of specific model for getting, kind of like the entire show on the road, getting your project off the ground?
Pretty much a lot of this has been funded directly out of my own pocket and off of inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't have like a set business model that I followed here. I pretty much followed the old school of, hey, let's do Artist Alley and find out what can be done. And eventually, after doing Artist Alley from like 2006 to about 2008, that's when I just went ahead and just started doing that. And then that's when I started learning about the actual publishing business portion of it, and started asking the important questions from people who've been in industry, who have developed their own stuff, and move forward that way and develop my own standpoint as far as how to move forward, how to do the marketing, how to go about just the everyday business. I mean, there's no real good rule of thumb to really follow. It's like you most likely have to follow what works best to maintain your audience.
Right, and also sometimes you don't know ahead of time what kind of opportunities may be presented to you that allow you to make to do networking or make connections that for like you said, for which there's no model to follow. Yeah, and so if you have any advice for somebody who wants to start out, maybe they've got a creative universe that they've got drawn out, they've got some stories, things like that. Do you have any advice about avoiding pitfalls or things that you particularly would like them to know to maybe help them out getting started?
Okay.
From your experiences, from your experiences.
From my experiences.
Yeah.
Okay. From my experience, these are some of the things that I would say to people who are trying to get their stuff off the ground. One, be serious about it. If you're just doing it for laughs and giggles and everything to that magnitude, you're pretty much going to be walking to a lion's den. For some reason, the average comic book goer knows who's serious and who's not serious. Based
Sure.
upon your presentation, based upon how you go about doing things. Now, as far as the business aspect of it, always surround yourself with people who have the same passion for the same story that you're working on.
You mean if you're going to do a collaboration, make sure that the people who you collaborate with...
It's not even really a collaboration, whether you pay them or whether you do it as a collaboration. If they do not have the same passion for that story that you're working on, it's going to be, how can I put it? What's the right word without being offensive? It's going to be very trying.
Right.
It's going to either try your patience, try your nerve,
right,
or it's going to make you get to the point where you're just ready to just throw in the towel. Because one of the things that I have to deal with over the course of my 5 years being in this as a full-fledged business is that I came across a few artists that was in it for nothing more than the money, and they just did what was asked of them. And then there's others that actually had the passion about it, and they literally would go out their way to help you. And the ones that normally go out their way to help you are the ones that you really want on your side, because the easiest reward for them is to keep the momentum going.
Sure.
Once they see success, guess what? That success breeds more success, and breeds more success, and brings more success. Perfect example. You guys interviewed Kimberly Mosberry. Kimberly Mosberry did AWF for me. Now, from her doing AWF for me, I ended up helping her develop Enigma, her own creation, her own intellectual property.
Right.
It became successful. I'm working with another person by the name of B.C. Dixon. He's trying. He wanted to be a novelist, but as he worked with me, he's seen that there's a market for graphic novels, and so now he's shifting gears from doing novels to graphic novels. I mean, he's not all the way ready as of yet, but once he really learns the ropes and really do his homework and get everything in order, he's going to be another successful person that breathes more and more success into it.
And you can see this already from the talent that he's displayed.
He has the ability. It's going to take how bad does he want it, and is he willing to accept the criticism and really go back and retool certain things where it can go and be the success that it's supposed to be.
So I mean, in addition to you doing what you do, it does sound like that you already mentored other people in helping them develop their own art with an eye toward pushing them toward success. Is that true? Is that fair to say?
That's pretty much the most accurate way to say it. Because to me, it's more along the lines, especially as a publisher, that you don't always want people to work on whatever you think is best. They're going to have ideas. They're going to want to develop their own thing. They want to develop how to go about their own daily business.
Right.
And once you help them reach that plateau, guess what? Their success is going to come back to you, because now they're still working on the original project that you hired them for. Now they're also doing their own stuff, and as they move further and further out, your work moves further and further out, because their work is now accompanies whatever else they did for you.
Right.
So let's, like with Kimberly Mosberry, the further Enigma goes, the further AWF goes as well, because people are going to follow her work.
Right.
I can't claim AWF by myself. She worked on it. She did the artwork for it. For me to claim it would be too selfish. You have to let her work stand for its own. Just like with AWF, I have to let my story stand on its own. With Enigma, her story and artwork has to stand on her own. Now she also has a colorist. I believe his name is Jonathan Price. His coloring has to stand on his own. The further that she goes with Enigma, the more people are going to see Jonathan Price. And when Jonathan Price finishes up with a couple of his books, a couple of his series that I know about, the same thing is going to happen. People who follow Jonathan Price are going to eventually come back to follow Kimberly Mosberry, who are going to eventually come back to follow AWF, which is eventually going to come back to follow me.
So, what you've done is you have put together a model where, it's not exactly a collaboration, but in some ways it might be. If somebody's, trading some, you have a colorist, you have an inker, you have somebody who writes a story. But the fact of the matter is, what you've done is you have put together a network of people whose synergy actually feeds, each other in the service of bringing everybody forward. It's like, what do they say? They say, a rising tide floats all boats. Meaning that when one benefits, they all can benefit, which goes against, some of the creatives out there. Some of the creatives treat, treat this industry or at least the creative industry as a zero-sum game, especially with a lot of black artists, and they behave as though for every dollar that Joe Mcfee makes, that's like taking a dollar out of their pocket. It's a dollar they can't have because they look at it as just such a singular game that it's like there's only $10 to go around, and if Joe gets 7, then about all I can get is I can just get the remaining 3. But your own business model and your own mentoring model is in opposition to that, and actually does something in order to promote the creativity of a broad swath of people, and I find that refreshing. Hang on a second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is the November 1st, 2013 edition, and we're talking to Joe D. Mcfee. And would you let me make sure I pronounce this right? This is say your studio name one more time.
Xigency Studios.
Xigency Studio, and you can find his work at www.xigencystudios, all one word, .com, and you can check him out there. Excuse me. So it sounds to me like you have some great people putting this all together, and that you guys are cooperating and collaborating in terms of pushing everybody forward, because the more people know about all of you, the more publicity, the more other people are going to know what you guys do. Let's flash forward. Let's go forward like 5 years. Where do you think this is going to take you? Do you think you're going to have, and I don't want to say a stable, but do you think you'll have a collective of creatives who will be able to all point back to getting involved with you and some of the people you work with as the impetus for having brought them, to notice by the greater industry?
Well, this is the thing. 5 years from now, I hope I have the finances to do that. And the reason why I say I have to have the finances to do that is more so that the more we produce, either the stuff that I work on, the stuff that Kimberly works on, I want to get to the point where people could come to me if they're serious, they're ready, and they really have a passion for it, and they really want to do it based upon what I just told you. There's nothing that cannot be done. I mean, it's not really about who makes what type of money. It's about control of the resources. If we produce this way where everything reflects around just the general concept of what Xigency Studios is about, instead of who's making more money out of anybody else, then everything will work out. It follows a team dynamic that is so unique that the fact that Kimberly made $500 at this convention does not impact the bottom line for Xigency Studios.
Well, and not only that, but you're not sitting there going, oh, man, here I helped her do all of this stuff, and she made $500, and I didn't go to the show, and I didn't make anything. Rather than sitting there with that kind of piss-poor attitude, excuse me for saying that, everybody, you're busy lauding the fact that everybody is moving forward, everybody is getting more notice, everybody is picking up more steam, and that's very unselfish, and in some ways very, very unusual. It's very unusual, and I have nothing but praise and admiration for that.
Well, one of the things that I learned, and this is something that I picked up while I was at San Diego this year, people follow people who they like. It's more important to be a likable person in the industry than anything else. So you really can't sit back and worry about, oh, this person over here made $400 more than I did at the same convention, at the same booth that, we are at the company booth, and this person made $400 more than this. It doesn't matter. If they like Kimberly, or if they like B.C. Dixon. They're going to follow B.C. Dixon. B.C. Dixon makes a fan. The fan of B.C. Dixon, if he becomes an ultra fan, is going to end up picking up everything that is related to B.C. Dixon.
Right.
So anybody who works with B.C. Dixon is now going to be affected by that one fan, and he's going to end up picking up all products. As long as B.C. Dixon stays in good favor with that fan, everything is copacetic. Everybody's going to get their share of that overall pie that results from it.
Right.
Same thing with Kimberly. Same thing with me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The only thing that really comes back down as far as the money is bringing something to the table. I mean, printing books is not cheap. Getting booths at like C2E2's, Wizard World, San Diego Comic Con, New York Comic Con, any little bitty show out here in the general area or in the Midwest or in the West or anything, that costs money. There's going to have to be that fine line where, if Kimberly makes $500, Kimberly's $500, nine times out of 10 is going to be, okay, I'm going to use that $500 to go to this convention over here. It's like, hey, let's tag team this. I could get this. Can you cover this? And we go out there together. That's how it works.
Right.
Nobody really has to really foot the bill. We don't have to follow the major standpoint like some of the bigger publishing companies that are out there.
Well, I mean, being able to self-publish today, the digital tools that are available, obviously the Internet helps. A lot of people use social networking to very good effect to maintain contact with their fans, which I think, would you say that that's pretty important? I mean, obviously they want to like what you have, but I mean, what kind of dialogue do you carry on with your fans?
It's important, but it also takes another level of branding.
Okay.
And the thing about it is everybody has access to social media. Everybody has access to most digital formats here. Nothing beats a face-to-face. Nothing beats taking, 20 minutes or 30 minutes out of your time sitting there shooting the breeze with somebody at a physical convention.
Right.
Whether they buy something or not. If they like you as an individual, they might come back, and if they start remembering you, the more that they see you, the more likely they're going to take a chance on purchasing from you. And that's the thing that cannot be done on social media. The thing about social media is it's the easiest way to get the latest and breaking news out there as far as what you're doing.
Right.
But you cannot substitute that with meeting the actual person. If you say that you're going to be at event X, Y, and Z, you better be at event X, Y, and Z, and you have to be friendly and you have to talk to the people. Whether you like their criticism or hate their criticism, you have to grin and bear it, because the way that you react to it will make or break whether that individual becomes a fan. And especially if you truly listen to them and take their criticism, they'll become more of your fan.
Well, I was about to say that. Not only that, but you know what? When your fans start telling you the things that they like, the things that they don't like, you damn well ought to listen, because, I mean, this is your market. This is your audience. These are the people who spend money on you. And there is an enlightened self-interest in not only seeking out that face-to-face contact, but the maintenance of it. Essentially what you're doing is you're maintaining a relationship, even though it may not be close, even though you may not see this person for 2-3 years at a time, or maybe you only see them once. You still are maintaining a relationship in the service of promoting your art. And a lot of people, I know people who don't like to listen to fans. They go, yeah, I want to go to the show, but when they start telling me about what I should and should not do, I'm not down with that, et cetera, et cetera. But this is direct marketing contact. This is like doing a focus group without having to pay thousands of dollars to do it. And how many shows do you think you do a year? I mean, at least lately. You mentioned C2E2. I didn't make it to it this year because I found out about it late.
6 to 7 a year.
Okay.
I believe because if I include like a lot of the local shows, it's like somewhere between 6 to 7. Out of the major events, it's normally 3 out of the year.
Okay.
So
and
far I've been consistent
ahead.
with C2E2. I have not missed the C2E2 as of right now.
Mm-hmm.
I did not do Wizard this year, but I have stopped doing Wizard for a myriad of other reasons, which I'm not going to get into because I don't like airing anything bad about any organization.
Oh, okay. I was thinking maybe there was a warrant out for you or something like that.
No,
you can't go back to that town.
No.
Okay, good. Because I don't want anybody.
It's about something that happened to the company the year prior.
Sure.
That never got resolved, and because it never got resolved, it was just like, okay, let's take a year back. Let's see what really happens with the show from this point forward. Does it go up? Does it go down? How the fans relate to it, and trust me, I got feedback back about that show. So, but however, this was like the first year that I went to San Diego. I got to go back to San Diego, and I missed out going to New York with Kimberly because Kimberly was able to get into New York this year. And I was like, I just could not afford it. But
yeah.
But if I would have went to New York, that would have been my third major show for the year. So I did 2 this year, and I did 3 to 4 smaller shows, 3 to 4 smaller shows. So that's 6 for this year. I know last year was like 7. That's not including like the book signings and stuff like that. So it's a lot of stuff that goes into it. A lot of stuff that goes into it. And the major thing here is that you never know who's really paying attention to you. You really don't, and you also don't know what friendships you're going to build with other people in the industry because of it too.
Right. Give us an example.
For example, people might have heard of Greg Horn.
Okay.
Greg Horn has done covers for the AWS series. He's done the cover for us for issue number 3, and he did the cover for issue number 5 for AWS. Peter Potamati, I bounced a lot of the business aspects off of him, and he has done several commissions for me for Amazonia and for AWF, which I have not released as of yet.
Okay.
There was another person, I can't pronounce her last name, Teresa. Her last name is an Italian last name. She's in Italy. She has worked on things like Winx Club, Huntic, and a few other major comic book series that was made into TV series. I could keep going. I mean, these are people who I never would have thought that would take the time and the effort to actually work with me, and I appreciate that more so than anything.
Right. And see, it sounds like it all came from you, not only putting yourself out there, but committing yourself to maintaining these relationships, so that you could work with these people, so that I guess what people don't, some people don't realize is how important networking is, and being able to maintain your network over time. And a lot of these people you probably don't talk to all the time, but it sounds like you have a good relationship with them, one that has served you well.
Well, we see each other at shows and conventions, and they actually see how far their work is going into the industry. So it's not like somebody comes up to them and it's like, hey, I want you to do this. They get paid and they don't see their work ever again.
Right.
I mean, whenever you could actually have physical books printed or a physical product done and you see it all over the place, it shows your dedication of wanting to do something in that industry. And that's what they saw out of me. And, like I said, right now, it's like I consider it a blessing. Because they could have always said no because, one, I'm not a big name. I'm a guy wet behind his ears, still trying to learn a lot of stuff to move even forward, even now.
Mhm.
I mean, I know other people that I'm good friends with that's been in the industry a lot longer than I have, but yet they haven't seen some of the successful things that I have done over the past 5 years.
Right.
And I'm not just trying to hold that over their head. It's just more along the lines. It's just a good contrast because I asked them for advice, they asked me for advice. It's that whole networking aspect of it. It's like as long as you're willing to share and be a part of the bigger picture to move the industry forward, people are going to be for you one way or the other. People are just
Right.
going to, be there and say, hey, I hear pretty good things about this cat, or I hear pretty good things about how he handles the business aspect of it.
Mhm.
I might be willing to want to work with him.
Right.
And that's always a good thing to have on your side, especially if you're planning to do this as a publisher and you want to move up from just being the average writer or the average creator
Mhm.
and move into that publishing realm. You have to develop those relationships. You have to be willing to not only accept criticism but accept critiques about how you're handling your business. I mean, I met a lot of nice people in San Diego that I would have never met before. I mean, producers of movies. I met the founding fathers of Milestone Comics for the very first time. I actually had like a 20-minute conversation with Charlotte McDuffie, Dwayne McDuffie's wife. I mean, I'm actually asking them, shaking their hands, literally asking them questions and having dialogue with them. I mean, I've met a lot of these people through another person who is about to get ready to do some coloring for me, Corey Green, who ended up knowing a person by the name of Robert Roach, who written several comic book series and won several awards in comic book writing.
Mhm.
I mean, it's about really networking and really accepting the critiques and accepting the wisdom that comes from it.
Yeah. Now, as obviously you're a publisher. As a publisher, um, are how many other artists have you taken on as a publisher, and how do you generally find the people who you end up working with, or how do they end up finding you? And are you looking to expand? I mean, obviously, I would think that you are, but when you talk about being a publisher, being located here in Chicago, what are you looking for as a publisher in people to help out with their own art?
I look at their desire to really push for their intellectual property.
Mhm.
One of the things that I do a lot of, at least over the past 3 years, when I'm at like a major convention like C2E2, I actually put out there on like the website or while I'm doing live tweets, while I'm physically there at the booth that we're doing portfolio reviews.
Mhm.
And we really specifically tell them that there's no guarantee for employment. However,
Right.
we review people's portfolios, and the reason why I do portfolio reviews, even though we might not be hiring, is because it's one thing to be able to render good artwork or to be able to write a good story or to be able to color real well. It's another story to see that you're a team player, that you have a desire to do this. This is something that you really want to do, or you got a creative story that's in the back of your mind and you just don't know how to get it out. Those are the things that I look at when I do those portfolio reviews. It's one thing to just to say, here's my body of work.
Mhm.
But it's another thing to say, okay, tell me about this piece. What was your feeling as you did this piece here? Why did you do this panel this way as opposed to any other way? And the people kind of look at me strange, and then they kind of like, well, I did it this way because of this, that, and the other. And when I see that they applied their own interpretation to a script, that's a good thing, because that tells me that they're willing to invest in themselves into a project as opposed to following what's on a script.
It sounds very much like what you're doing is you're auditioning talent. You're always on the move looking to find, creatives who are truly creative and creatives who have the kind of the mentality that you're looking for, kind of an affinity, with the people that you want to work with maybe in the future, or people who you think you can work with in the future. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, it is, and you'll be surprised that I have people come up to me with their self-published books. It's like, we really want your opinion about this. I sit down, I will read their whole book. I will come back with a list of stuff that I saw that was wrong, or was a plot hole, or was this, or was that. And from that dialogue, I constantly had constant dialogue with that individual. They constantly show me more stuff and more stuff and more stuff and more stuff. Eventually, I'm going to get the financial backing where I can say, okay, you're ready. Come on, let's go ahead and publish it up under the company brand, or we're going to make a new brand for you.
All right, so people who are listening to this, both live and as a podcast, one of the things that I would like to ask you to do for them is, when you're going to any of these conventions, when you're going to have an appearance, please be sure to post that appearance at BSFS, so that, like me, tomorrow I can't do anything. I'm volunteering at something, but like next weekend, if I have a Saturday or a Sunday free, I want to look up on BSFS and see what may be happening here in Chicago, or if I'm in another city, I may be traveling. So, given what you've said about how you like to audition talent and how you essentially your screening process for not only finding talent, but finding the kind of mentality, finding the kind of people who have a work ethic that you enjoy, a work ethic that you find valuable, letting people know where you are and how they can contact you, or do that face-to-face, because face-to-face, like you said, there's nothing that can substitute for actually pressing the flesh and actually talking to somebody and getting to know them. Please post up all of your, whatever conventions you may be going to, book signings, anything like that, where you may be appearing, so that people can catch up with you.
Okay, that's not a problem. I'll just add that to the list of when we create our calendars. Now, when I create that major calendar out there on the Xigency Studio website, I take into consideration of everybody that's a part of the organization as of right now. So that would include Kimberly, that would include BC Dixon, that would include myself, that would include, special appearances by other people who have worked for us. That include like Terry Huddleston, Greg Horner if he's in town, Ladrissa Bonneville if she comes by and does Diva Gold for us, which is one of the characters out of AWF. I mean, we try to promote as much as we can as far as when we're available, where we're at. We're here to kind of help and guide people through this stuff, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Sure.
And people are telling, oh, it's really easy, just do X, Y, and Z, and you will sell books. It's like, no. You don't want to learn the hard way, because the hard way is, okay, you can create the book, but if you didn't get it copyrighted, you didn't do this, and you didn't do that, and you didn't sign this, and you don't cross your T's and dot your I's and lowercase J's, you're about to get messed over.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more than just putting pictures on paper and getting it photocopied and then being ready to sit at an artist alley table. There's a lot more that goes into it.
Sure. And then we mentioned something before we went on the air about the totality of the comic industry, and where it's going, what the numbers can be, what people should have in terms of realistic expectations about building the popularity in black themed comics. Let's talk a little bit about that, and why don't you go ahead and let everybody know the issue we were talking about? If you remember it.
Oh,
right?
I know, but I'm not sure if everybody's ready for this.
Well, no, you know what? This is why we do this, because not everything is all sweetness and light. Not everything, is icing on the cake. There's some nuts and bolts things. There's some sociology. There's some psychology. There's all kinds of things that have to do with black creativity, black art, all kinds of perspectives. And it was interesting to me that you brought it up, which is why I stopped you from getting into it. But let's go ahead and get into it.
Okay. Well, before this interview started, we were talking about one of the things that I would like to bring up, and that was the idea that as I go along on all of these different shows and everything, one of the major comments that I always hear from African Americans about quote unquote mainstream characters, everybody wants to put the blame on Marvel and DC, but I put the blame on mainstream characters, in quotes around mainstream characters, because that's a whole nother history lesson that I don't want to get into. They're up here wanting to know, it's like, well, how come there are not more of us out there in a lot of the major books that are out there and everything to that magnitude? And the simplest answer always comes back down to the business aspect. And the business aspect, as of right now, if you do it by demographic, African Americans make up less than 5% of the total comic book buying market as of today. It's slowly changing, but still, that number is still dismal, which means that some of the changes, some of the gripes, some of the complaints, a lot of the stuff that's being said at shows, a lot of stuff that's being said on the internet, a lot of the stuff that is being said, across the board, does not overchange that fact. And this is going more along the lines of a cultural issue. Why isn't African Americans buying comic books so that they can have what they want? With the how can I put this? With the vast variety of people of African American descent creating comic books nowadays, we're not even buying them from people like myself or other people who are creating. I mean, I'm looking at the chat room, and I could look at the chat room, and I already see at least two others that I know of that are creating comic books right now. Our own are not buying even from us. So therefore, it comes back down to, it's like, where is all this anger and animosity is coming from? We have the tools, we have the vehicle to drive this thing, but yet, for some reason, in the United States, African Americans are not buying comic books. They're not buying anything that is directly related to them from their own. And what is even more weird is this. They're more likely to buy something that has been made popular through some other group first than their own. I mean, if you look at the music industry, you look at the movie industry, you look at any other industry, when we had a stronghold on a particular genre, eventually it gets moved to all other nationalities, and once it gets moved to other nationalities, we kind of drop off of the map.
Well, that is true. I mean, urban culture, urban culture worldwide is probably the most prevalent cultural art forms. Urban cultural art forms are probably the most prevalent worldwide than any other meme. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was world music. But now we're talking flat out, urban culture. We're talking about music. We're talking about art. We're talking about sports. We're talking about all of these entertainment mediums where African Americans not only excel, but they control. I don't want to say control, because control is bad, but where they excel in not only acceptance but popularity. So I guess your question is, why is it, given that meme and given that phenomenon, that we don't have as much representation in a field like comics, which are a direct feed to our children. Why do we have such a small pittance of the totality of the sales out there?
Well, it's not just that. It's not that aspect of the question. The aspect of the question that I always get into this conundrum with is that there is representation out there. There is a number of us in this industry, just like there's a number of us in the medical industry. There's a number of us in the automotive. There's engineering. We have people across the board, but us at our African Americans as a urban culture does not go out and seek those things. They just expect it just to be automatically put out there, just handed. Where is that desire to go out and seek anymore? If you truly think about it, the 70s, the 80s, there was a seeking for that. The whole idea of rap back in the early 80s was literally a true art form. Even when gangster rap came out in the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s, it was an extension of an art form. We got away from that. There's no more seeking of that art form. It has been generalized so much that it's just out there. And that's the reason why I was saying put mainstream characters in quotation marks. It's not the company that makes the character mainstream. It's people that makes it mainstream. When you
it's really, the audience.
When you really look at, people are up here complaining about Superman, Batman. It's like, let's look at Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is an icon because she's more noted for the World War II after she's iconic like Rosie the Riveter.
Right.
She's a representation of a time frame that has a need for a strong female. Superman has the same aspect. There was a need back in the early early 40s where people were actually looking for what would make the actually human being more athletic, more agile, for they could do fighting stronger, smarter, and all this other stuff. Superman was a comment about that. That what makes him mainstream. People bought into that. People made that happen, and that happened for 60+ years now.
Right. I mean, part of that component, though, from the onset, was a certain amount of nationalistic pride.
Exactly.
Okay, that was a component of it. And as we found out when we elected a half-black president of the United States, there's a whole lot of people out there who are still just as racist, just as biased, just as hateful about toward African Americans as in any other time, as the Civil War, whatever. Okay, so when you have that kind of sociology in your cultural psychology, how do you let's maybe ask the question, how can you overcome that so that something that is not white bred, not white born, not mainstream culturally raised up, how can you push that to the forefront in a way that overcomes the cultural handicaps that we just spoke about?
Well,
what's your thought on that?
Here's a different spin on what you just said. I believe we put too much stock in rhetoric and stereotypes because of the simple fact that all of it is based in some truth one way or another.
Okay.
Again, let's look at the socioeconomic aspect of where every person is at as of right now in the United States. Using the president as an example, A lot, like you said, a lot of the hatred and everything that's coming out right now. But then again, look at the overall state of our country. Let's look at, is it easier to blame everything on a president because of his nationality, or is it easier to blame us as people for electing the wrong people to run our country? To me, it's easier to blame an African American president than to own up to my own mistakes. I mean, that's has been ingrained into our culture as a country for so long that you go, like you said, you got to go all the way back to slavery. It was easier to say, hey, you know, we got these slaves over here to do X, Y, and Z, and then once we got our freedom, the mentality of the other races remained the same because socially, economic, so they lost money. Their whole aspect has changed. Instead of saying, hey, we got people who we did wrong over here, we must make amends to it, it was just easier to spread more and more hatred. It's more along the lines of the idea of understanding the culture behind it. One of the things that I get into arguments about with a lot of people here, and it gets kind of weird, but it's interesting at the same aspect. And that question is, can an African American be a racist?
Well,
and the answer to that is you really don't know.
Well, technically, in the United States of America, a black man or a black woman cannot be a racist because implicit in the definition is the only way in order for someone to be racist, they have to be a member of the dominant subgroup, okay? And since we cannot be members of the dominant subgroup just by definition of the word, no, we can't be racist. But I will tell you right now, I'm one of the most racist people out there because I have issues, and I take them out by writing. But my prejudices, my stereotypes, and those things, I of course, like everybody else, including, the Grand Wizard of the KKK, they all think that they come by them honestly. Okay, so when they verbalize those things that they believe, and when they verbalize the memes that we all know are so damaging, they're doing it from the perspective of, well, of course this is the way I feel because this is the way it is. So there's a kind of a single-mindedness in that's going to be tough to overcome. I think one of the most telling statistics right now is back during, just before the Civil War, I was talking to somebody earlier today, we had about 300,000 to 800,000 freed black men and women in this country, who came over as slaves or were freed or even may have come here as free people. And essentially, they controlled 0.5% of the wealth of this country. Okay, let's flash forward several hundred years. And today, even today, that statistic has not changed. African Americans still only control 0.5% of the wealth in this country, and what is it? There's like 30 million of us or whatever. So in terms of economic power, in terms of some very realistic but disturbing numbers, we haven't got moved the dime at all. We haven't moved the ball at all in the playing field. So when you take the totality of the realistic numbers in terms of marketing, in terms of control of our own destiny, in terms of finances, it's a tough road to hoe to go ahead and make some inroads that would be statistically and financially significant when you lack the financial power to do that. Now, the times when we actually can excel, we can go back to maybe Berry Gordy's time at the head of Motown, when Motown was the hottest thing out there. There was, obviously there was a lot of money being, changing hands. There were a lot of black artists who suddenly had opportunities that they did not have previously. How do we leverage that for an industry like the comic book industry, for even our own movies and things like that. Where do you think we can go with that?
Well, I'm looking at a lot of the stuff that's going on in the chat room right now, and
Uh-huh.
I agree with Miss Flynn here. Miss Flynn hit it right on the head.
Oh yeah, I'm not a racist. I am a bigot. No, she's absolutely right. I am a bigot. I'm the biggest bigot around.
But
We'll talk about that later.
the thing about it that makes people bigots is not what you're stating here. Because if you truly look at the history of this country, the history of this country was formed on the idea of labeling people based upon either their wealth, their standing in the society, or what they can do.
Right.
If you look at other nations in the world, they don't look at the fact that you're dark skinned, light skinned, or anything. If you're a German, you're a German. If you're Chinese, you're Chinese. Regardless of if you're of the same skin color or anything. Only in the United States where we put so much stock of whether somebody is male or female, straight, gay, or bisexual, white, black, Hispanic, polka dot, we put that emphasis on that as a culture.
Right.
The whole standpoint as far as the economic difference is those who have the control. And those who have the control are not necessarily what we think. It's pretty much the wealthiest people that has the true control over this country. It's not really white people have more control than blacks and Hispanic has more control over whites. It's more along the line the wealthy of this country pretty much dictate the flow of everything. So if you want to get an equal share of that pie, either you have to A, get in the good graces of those that are in power, or B, take the power away from them in the first place and revolutionize everything from that point forward. So technically, everybody in the United States, in some form or some fashion, one day is going to wake up and have a bigoted attitude, regardless. How do you get around it? Just don't play into that game of bigotry.
Right. The only way to win is not to play. Somebody mentioned here reverse racism, and people use that term mostly, when they're discussing things like, what's the famous? Affirmative action. That's their big thing. Affirmative action is just reverse racism, and essentially for stupid, it's reverse racism if you're stupid, because affirmative action is designed to address institutional slights that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not, you have a whole class of white folks who are going, I'm being discriminated against. And no, what's happening is somebody's trying to level the playing field in a way that is effective.
This is how you defeat that. Hit them with statistics. If for affirmative action was reverse racism, then why is the greatest benefactor of affirmative action has always been Caucasian women?
White women.
By percentages. Reason why is because of the simple fact that they classify women as a minority. Again, coming back to the idea of why this country has so many different labels. And what was even more shocking is that if you was not Caucasian and you were female, you get to have a double dip in the affirmative action side of things.
Right.
And that came out. But yet a lot of people won't point fingers at that. They will point fingers at the one African American guy that got a job over them because they were more qualified. And then now they have to go above and beyond the call of duty to find out why this black individual was more qualified than anybody else.
Or got into college when their son did not or daughter did not.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I work out my issues by writing. I don't know if you know
back down to what I said earlier.
Yep.
Writing mimics reality. It mimics reality. You can't get around it. Cannot get around it. And that's one of the things. And to be quite honest with you, that's one of the missing aspects in the comic book industry, to be quite honest here. And now you're seeing a greater surge of women in the comic book industry. It used to be a truly male-dominated industry, and now you're seeing more and more women being involved in it. And I'm happy for it because now you got better representation of females in comic books right now.
Yeah, I've noticed that up until recently, all of the black women in comic books were drawn in such a way that they couldn't possibly stand up straight, and now we're seeing, and I know that's partially a joke, but we're just as prone to stereotypes as anybody else, but it's good to see that perspective starting to come out in a genre that not only is becoming more and more popular, but it's a direct entree to teens and preteens. So seeing those stories from differing perspectives, from women, for girls, even written, by women for young men, boys, I think is a refreshing change.
It's a much needed change, but look how many years that took to get to that point. I mean, the industry is evolving, and that's one of the things, like I said, coming back to the original point of why we were talking about this before the show began, is that the people who feel that the landscape is not changing is really not paying attention to the landscape, or really have not done their homework. It is literally changing. It might not be changing fast enough where it's making breaking news and it's just, hitting you upside the face every time you turn on a television. But it is changing. It is changing for the better. But the major thing that needs to have happen is a change in attitude. If you support things that you like, guess what? Those things that you like is going to stay around. So for example, if you like Luke Cage, if you buy Luke Cage comic books and buy everything that Luke Cage is in, guess what? Luke Cage is going to be around for the next 40 years. And you're going to start seeing television shows and movies and everything else around Luke Cage. It's kind of always have been that way, because it's not just somebody just saying they're creating comic books. It's always been a business. And it's just like any other product that's out there. It's like you buy one dishwashing liquid over another one because the one that you like the most does what it needs to do, and you like it, and you're going to constantly support it. And if you have to change brands, guess what? You're salty. Why? Because I want the stuff that worked. Why they guys mess with what I normally are used to, what I'm used to? People have those type of attitudes, and it's just more along the lines. If you want something that you're used to, support those individuals that are producing it. It's simple as that. It's just simple as that. I mean, if you want more black representation in comic books, support those creators that are doing those characters that you love, and buy the books. Tell your friends about it. It's not just about buying it. It's about buying it, telling your friends, and keeping that movement going. And once people learn that as a whole, guess what? You're going to see another change in the landscape.
Well, yeah, people, once mass, I don't want to call them mass market people. Excuse me. Once you have an industry realizing what's popular, they're going to do what they want to do. They're going to do what you want them to do to make that money. It by and large, bottom line, it is a business. And even if, look at how incensed mass media was over the fact that gangster rap was so popular. Oh, they're talking about shooting people. Oh, they're talking about shooting cops. Oh, and all this caterwauling about the content of the songs, and the thing that they could not get over, the thing that they could not, that they couldn't discount, was the fact that it was popular enough that regardless of what the content was, all of these, Sony, BMI, all of these publishers were snapping up all of these artists because it was making money. So obviously marketing pressure is something that always is important in terms of, like you said, getting getting content creators to put out the kind of content that you want. Just look at an example like that where mainstream America was so incensed about the content of rap music, and yet now, now a lot of that is pretty tame and considered mainstream, because it's just been around so long.
Again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Because it's been over-popularized and it has been ingrained in culture. Now it's considered a mainstay or mainstream concept. That's the reason why when people say it's like, oh, I don't like the mainstream characters, it's like, okay, put close around mainstream because now you're about to get into a comic book history, a history lesson. Every time you say mainstream, there's going to be some type of history lesson behind it for you to understand why it is that way, as opposed to, oh, it doesn't have to be that way, but because other people supported it, it became, a namesake. It became something that people know about. When people see that red S on a yellow background, they know Superman. It's been around. It's been around for that long. But
that damn bat signal.
Yep. To address what Sorain Comics just said about the static comic book, why it was dropped, that was part of the reason why it was dropped. The other part of it was the writer. The writer of the New 52 static comic book was at a disagreement with one of the artists, and the DC editor sided with the artist because the writer wanted to keep Static the way that he was originally with Milestone Comics, the way that he was originally meant to be. And because he became uncomfortable with it, they couldn't find anybody else to take over the writing aspect of it. So they came back to him and said, okay, fine, we'll yield to these changes. Would you still write it? He said no, and that's the real reason why it was dropped. It was more because of the reason why people wanted the Static that they know, and they were slowly trying to change his characteristics to something else. It was more along the lines of creative differences.
Right. All of a sudden, artistically, things took a left turn.
Exactly.
So, just so that you know, we're coming down to the last 8 or 9 minutes of the show.
Wow, time goes by fast.
Well, it's like a time warp that I'm able to do and make people not realize that they've been talking that long. Is there anything that you would want to bring up at this point, that about the industry, other than what we just talked about, that you think is important for people starting out, people even in the middle, people who are basically trying to become, very successful content creators? I think the one thing that you did mention already, which is pay attention to your audience, that's a huge one. And, my admonishment for that is, and don't be sitting around expecting somebody to just feed you what you want to hear. Pay attention to what people say, and don't discount even bad critiques about something because there's something to be learned. In your experience, kind of like what's the most important way to keep yourself relevant and to keep your ideas fresh?
Keep yourself busy. But one of the things that I normally do is I'm constantly researching. I'm constantly reading different stuff. I'm constantly watching different stuff. One of the things that helps me out more so than anything, and a lot of people don't know this, I'm actually published in other sources other than myself. I have written pages and stories for Wonder Funders. I'm about to get ready to write a story for the Comic Book Artists Guild for an anthology that they're working on that was specifically geared towards women. I have done artwork that's now in a book that's out there on Amazon to benefit the people who were affected by the Boston Marathon bombing. I mean, people don't. I don't talk about that stuff a lot because that's some of the things that I really don't want too much fanfare for it because I do it just to keep myself acclimated to see what's out there, to work up under other people, to know what it's like if I ever decide to really walk away from the Xigency Studios and to work with somebody else, to go to like a Marvel or to work for somebody else's company. It's good to do those things from time to time, to actually work with other people where you're not the lead. And that's how you kind of stay relevant. You kind of stay on the forefront, because what I'm doing would be definitely different from what Marvel is doing, what DC is doing. Heck, it might be different from what Sovereign Comics is doing, or what Al Hubie is doing, or what Wonder Funders is doing. Everybody has their own unique system, and if you're able to write up under their system, most likely you could probably write up under other people's systems as well, and it could boost your name out there a little bit more, because now you work with this group and they say it's like, hey, I remember this guy. He was real good with making sure that this, that, and the other was done, and now they're working for Marvel. It's like, hey, let me reach out to him and see if he's available.
Now, that kind of begs the question, if a Marvel comes to you and says, hey, we'd like to add you to our stable, we like your characters, this, that, are you open?
No.
No?
They can't afford to take over my IP. But I'd be more willing to work with their existing characters, but no, they cannot take my IP. I would not sell my IP. No. Intellectual property is more of a higher commodity than land in the United States, to be quite honest here. The way that the entertainment industry is nowadays, owning your own intellectual property is more so a mainstay to make certain that you stay paid than to sell it to somebody else when you lose control. But if Marvel comes to you and say, hey, I want you to write the Avengers, sure, I'll go ahead and do it. Why not? It's a paycheck. It's a paycheck,
Yes.
Yeah.
And that, there are a lot of people who are willing to sell out right away because they see the money, or they think that's a quick way for them to move their career forward. But essentially what you're doing is you're like you said, you're selling off a piece of yourself. You're selling off your own creativity. And you should really take a good, close look at just what that means before you go ahead and fall into that.
And like I said, that takes a lot of forethought to actually see it. You have to learn a lot about the legal terms behind intellectual property, and understand what it really means when you sit down and create a story. And when you sit down and create that story, and you looking at it from all angles and everything, and you seeing it for what it is, all your labor, all your hard work, all your blood, sweat, and tears, all the time that you spend at comic book conventions, at comic book stores to get your book out there, all the time that you spend out there on the web posting pictures and everything, all the money that, like you said, all the money that you spend in copyrights for your IP, all the trademarks that go into it, it really doesn't have a price tag. It really doesn't. That is stuff that you can never get back if you sell it.
Well, not only that, but, you have to wonder, okay, some people say, I could sell this and I could do another character or whatever. But the reason why somebody came to you in the first place was because not only did it have market value, but it had intrinsic value as an intellectual endeavor. And that's something that sometimes is pretty tough to put a price on. And I think your advice to think it through very carefully and examine just what it means to you are words to live by. I hate to do this because this has been great, but we are coming up to the last couple minutes of the show. First of all, I want to thank you, man. I mean, it's kind of cool. We haven't met yet. We live in town. We grew up sort of in close proximity in the same neighborhoods. One of these days, we're going to have to get together for lunch as soon as I get the sheriff's ankle bracelet off. And
Revolution.
well, they keep telling me try the butter and everything, but my foot is just too damn big. But seriously, I had a great time. I hope you did too. I want to thank you for being here because obviously you're doing well. You have a what I think will be an award-winning model for moving people forward. And for those people who are looking for a publisher, now do you do books, everything, or is it mostly comic books you're publishing, or are you just becoming a full-fledged publisher?
I'm slowly moving towards full-fledged publishing where it wouldn't matter if it was comic book, graphic novel, or regular word novels, regular novels as a whole.
Great. So if you're in Chicago, you know how to find them. If not, go to the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. Take a close look through the membership. Look for Joe Mcfee and get in touch with him. If you're going to check him out on his website, it's www, and you have to listen carefully, Xigency Studios.com, Xigency Studios.com. You're also on Facebook and Twitter, so people can find you there. And again, excuse me, thank you, Joe. And Joe is going to start putting his appearances up on the events calendar at the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website, so that if you are looking for an opportunity to meet him, bump into him, check out a show, you'll be able to find, hopefully, his next appearances there. So again, thank you very much for being here, and now I'm going to turn it over to Jarvis, our skipper, so that he could do our closing remarks.
Okay, great. Guest 12 just announced that we're doing an Indiegogo campaign for the bail money for William. Everyone to be aware of that, and as usual, I want to thank everybody for participating on the show. Thank Joe for coming on with us tonight. William for doing a great job as always, making the show hot and interesting. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And I sometimes don't do this, but I need to make sure to thank people for sharing the information about the show. They share it on Facebook. They share it on Twitter. Whatever you're doing to help spread the word about Black Science Fiction Society and Black Science Fiction in general. Just keep doing what you're doing. I want to thank everyone for that. And with that said, I'm about to shut it down, and I'll be back over in the chat room on the main site in about 5 minutes.
And don't forget to tell... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just said thank you again.
And don't forget to tell your friends that this show is every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, live, and then very shortly after each show is concluded, the podcast is available. All you have to do is come to the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website, click on the radio link, and it will send you over to where all of the podcasts are done. On behalf of everybody who makes this happen, I want to wish everybody a good day. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch up with you next week.
All right. Good night, everybody. 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 Good night, everybody.